Love sometimes arrives in the most unexpected places, changing lives in ways no one could foresee. Elisa Romero, a dedicated concierge at a 5-star Miami hotel, never imagined that one simple hug would alter the course of her life. When billionaire hotel owner Helena Marlowe witnesses that quiet, innocent moment, she murmurs words that begin a transformation for them both. It becomes a story of courage, vulnerability, and discovering love where it is least expected. The elevator doors open to a marble lobby where crystal chandeliers cast soft, shifting shadows across the walls. Morning sunlight pours through floor to ceiling windows, painting golden streaks across the polished floor. Elisa adjusts her navy blazer and checks her watch. It is 3 minutes before her shift officially begins, though she has already been there for 20 minutes, ensuring everything is flawless. Elisa Romero has served as head concierge at the 5-star hotel for 3 years. The role is far more than booking restaurants or arranging transportation. It requires reading people, anticipating needs before they are spoken, and creating small moments of magic in a world where expectations rise as high as the penthouse suites. The lobby slowly transforms from a quiet sanctuary into a lively hub. Guests in designer clothing step out of elevators, their footsteps echoing like a refined rhythm against the marble. Elisa takes her place behind the mahogany concierge desk, straightening the fresh orchids that arrive each morning at precisely 6:30. James, the morning bellhop, greets her warmly as he wheels a cart stacked with designer luggage. His genuine smile reflects the sense of family shared among the staff. Despite the luxury and demanding clientele, they exchange a few words about departing guests, and Elisa allows herself a small, satisfied smile, knowing she has done her job well. Then comes the familiar sensation of being watched. Elisa glances toward the mezzanine level where the executive offices sit behind glass walls. Helena Marlowe stands there. Even from a distance, she commands attention. At 41, she carries herself with effortless confidence, her auburn hair catching the light like polished copper. Her charcoal, gray suit speaks of power and precision, and her posture reflects years of high-stakes decisions. Their eyes meet briefly before Helena turns and disappears into her office. Elisa feels her heart skip, a reaction she has tried to ignore for months. Helena is not only beautiful but magnetic, the kind of presence that unsettles even the most composed individuals. Their lives exist in entirely different worlds. Helena, the billionaire owner of a vast hotel empire. Elisa, a dedicated concierge living a modest life. Maria, the front desk manager, interrupts Elisa's thoughts with a teasing remark about Helena's watchful nature. Elisa brushes it off, though she cannot fully dismiss the idea. Memories surface of moments when Helena appeared unexpectedly, stepping in with calm authority to resolve tense situations. Each time, her presence left an impression that lingered longer than it should. The arrival of a nervous family draws Elisa back to her duties. With warmth and professionalism, she reassures them, arranges early comfort in the VIP lounge, and ensures their needs are met before they even have to ask. Their visible relief reminds her why she loves her work. It is not about luxury or status, but about easing burdens and creating comfort in small, meaningful ways. As the elevator doors close behind the grateful family, Elisa turns and finds Helena standing just a few feet away. Up close, her presence is even more striking. Her gray-green eyes seem to notice everything, and her composed demeanor carries quiet intensity. She acknowledges Elisa's thoughtful handling of the guests and adds a precise instruction regarding a guest's allergy, revealing her meticulous attention to detail. Elisa responds quickly, noting everything, determined to meet the standard Helena clearly expects. Helena lingers for a moment as if considering something more, then simply nods and walks away, her heels echoing softly across the marble floor. Elisa remains still, replaying the moment. There is something in Helena's gaze that feels different, something warmer, more personal, almost lonely. The thought unsettles her and she pushes it aside, convincing herself it cannot be true. A message soon appears on her phone from an unknown number, assigning her a task with careful attention to a guest's needs. The realization dawns that Helena has given her direct contact. Elisa tells herself it is purely professional, nothing unusual, yet the feeling that something is shifting refuses to fade. Weeks pass, filled with brief, precise messages from Helena. Each one is professional, that carries a tone that feels quietly personal. Elisa begins to anticipate them, finding herself drawn to the connection in ways she cannot fully explain. Now the hotel prepares for a grand charity gala, alive with energy and meticulous planning. Florists arrange elaborate displays, staff polish every detail to perfection, and Elisa moves seamlessly through it all, ensuring everything runs flawlessly. Guests begin to arrive, stepping out of luxury cars into the glowing lobby, as the evening promises elegance, purpose, and perhaps the beginning of something neither Elisa nor Helena fully understands yet. Women in designer gowns that cost more than a car moved gracefully through the ballroom, while men in perfectly tailored tuxedos shimmered with quiet confidence and expensive jewelry. The entire space glittered with elegance and status. Then she appeared, not Helena, who had already drawn countless glances throughout the day as she moved through the hotel with the precision of a commanding general. She wore a navy blue gown that fit her flawlessly, her hair styled in an elegant updo that revealed the graceful curve of her neck. Every glimpse of her had been enough to steal the breath from my chest. The woman stepping through the doors now was someone from a different chapter of my life. Marina. She turned at the sound of her name, and her face lit up with the same radiant smile that once led us into endless trouble during high school. Marina Santos, my childhood best friend, my partner in every reckless adventure, the one who taught me how to drive and stood beside me through the hardest moments of my family's struggles. She ran across the marble floor, her emerald green dress flowing behind her, and wrapped me in a hug so tight it lifted me off the ground. She still smelled like vanilla and mischief, still embraced me as if she could make up for all the lost years in a single moment. We laughed, holding on to each other, overwhelmed by the sudden reunion. She explained her presence at the gala, now working for Meridian Entertainment and representing one of the event's sponsors. Pride filled her voice as she spoke about her work, her life in Los Angeles, and everything she had built for herself. She stepped back to look at me, admiration shining in her eyes, and I felt a quiet sense of pride as I told her about my role as head concierge. She reminded me of who I had always been, someone who could solve problems and bring order to chaos. Memories of our younger days came rushing back, filled with laughter, mischief, and the kind of loyalty that never truly fades. We stood in the middle of the lobby talking as if time had never passed. She shared stories of her life in Beverly Hills, her recent breakup, and the highs and lows of chasing success. I spoke about Miami, the hotel, and how much I loved what I did. What I failed to notice was the figure watching us from above. Helena stood on the mezzanine, completely still. Her hands gripped the railing tightly, her composure showing the faintest crack. A subtle tension settled in her expression, a flicker of something almost human breaking through her usual calm control. For a brief moment, the woman known for her unshakable poise revealed something deeper beneath the surface. James approached her with guest updates, but her attention remained fixed on the scene below. Her voice stayed steady, though something unspoken lingered beneath it. Down in the lobby, Marina held onto my hands, her excitement unwavering. She spoke about staying in touch, about how much she had missed me, and I felt the same warmth in return. Beneath her bright energy, there was a faint shadow, a hint that not everything in her life was as perfect as it seemed. Before the moment could stretch further, Patricia rushed over with urgency written across her face. A technical issue threatened the auction system and immediate attention was needed. I excused myself, ready to handle the situation, but Marina's expression lit up with enthusiasm. The system belonged to her company, and she insisted on helping. Together, we hurried toward the ballroom, her voice animated as she explained the problem and its solution. Being around her brought a sense of lightness I had not felt in months, as if reconnecting with the past had reopened a part of me I had forgotten. Behind us, Helena watched silently as we disappeared into the ballroom. Her face returned to its familiar blankness, the same expression she wore in high-stakes negotiations. Whatever she felt remained carefully hidden behind the controlled exterior. The technical issue was resolved in minutes. Marina worked with effortless confidence, restoring the system before anyone else could even react. I watched in admiration, grateful for her presence and her brilliance. The gala began and the evening unfolded in a blur of movement and responsibility. Champagne glasses clinked, conversations flowed, and small crises emerged only to be swiftly resolved. I guided guests, managed last-minute requests, and ensured everything ran seamlessly. Marina stayed close, sometimes assisting, sometimes observing with quiet amusement. Having her there felt like weaving a piece of my past into my present. She saw me in a way others did not, understanding not just what I did, but who I was beneath it all. As the night progressed, she noticed the subtle shifts in my attention, the way my gaze drifted toward the executive offices. Her knowing smile carried a familiarity that made it impossible to hide anything from her. She understood more than I was ready to admit. The auction began, filling the room with energy and generosity. Bidding wars unfolded, donations soared, and by the end of it all, millions had been raised for the children's hospital. The success of the night brought a sense of accomplishment that spread through everyone present. As the event came to a close and guests filtered out into the warm Miami night, a realization settled in. Helena had been everywhere during the preparations, yet once the gala began, she had disappeared entirely. Marina noticed my attention drifting toward the empty mezzanine, her expression quietly observant. She said nothing directly, but her understanding was clear. She pulled me toward the elevator, suggesting a break from the intensity of the evening. We made our way to the rooftop terrace, where the city stretched out below in a sea of lights. The ocean breeze cooled the lingering tension of the night, bringing a rare moment of calm. Leaning against the railing, Marina spoke softly about what she had missed. Not the city, not the success, but the connection we once shared. Her words carried a weight that revealed more than her bright smile ever had. She admitted the truth beneath her achievements. Success had brought her everything she thought she wanted, yet it had not brought happiness. She had been chasing a version of life that never truly belonged to her, believing that fulfillment would come with enough accomplishments. Standing there beside her, the contrast between appearances and reality became impossible to ignore. The glittering world below, filled with wealth and ambition, suddenly felt quieter, more complicated, as if every shining surface concealed a deeper story waiting to be understood. I reached for her hand, holding on to the warmth of the moment. She admitted that being there, standing beside me and feeling like herself again, brought her a kind of happiness she had not felt in a long time. Then she faced me fully, her expression open and unguarded, and spoke about the possibility of returning to Miami, of rebuilding her life in a place that once felt like home. She acknowledged the weight of such a decision and the uncertainty that came with it. She spoke about taking things slowly, about rediscovering whether we still fit into each other's lives after so many years apart. Seeing me again, seeing the life I had built, stirred something in her, a desire to try again and find something real. The ocean breeze carried faint music from the hotel below, and beneath a sky filled with stars, the world seemed wide with possibility. In that quiet moment, everything felt within reach. One floor below, Helena Marlowe stood at her office window, watching our silhouettes on the terrace. Reflected in the glass was an expression of raw pain, something so unguarded it would have shocked anyone who believed she was untouchable. Her hand rested against the window, as she whispered words meant only for herself, unable to understand the depth of what she was feeling. The Monday morning after the gala carried a different energy. It was not just the exhaustion from the long weekend or the ache from hours spent in heels. Something in the atmosphere had shifted, like the stillness before a storm. I arrived early, as always, and immediately noticed that Helena's office lights were already on. Through the glass walls of the mezzanine, her silhouette moved back and forth, restless, pacing with an intensity that felt unusual even for her. Maria appeared beside me with coffee, her sharp eyes quickly reading more than I intended to show. She spoke lightly, but her curiosity lingered beneath every word. She brought up the reunion from Friday night, making it clear that it had not gone unnoticed. I tried to downplay it, describing Marina as an old friend in town for work, someone who had helped with the auction and shared a few memories. Maria's response made it clear she was not convinced. There was a sense that something larger had unfolded, something that had caught attention beyond just hers. Before the conversation could continue, James approached, his usual cheerful demeanor replaced with unease. He delivered a message that immediately tightened the air around me. Helena wanted to see me in her office right away. There was no explanation, only the quiet warning that she had been there since early morning and had already gone through multiple assistants. I straightened myself, masking the sudden tension, and headed toward the elevator. The short ride felt far longer than it should have. I had been in Helena's office many times before, but this felt different. This time I had been called. The outer office was empty when I arrived, an unusual sight. A cup of coffee still steamed on the desk, untouched. I knocked, steadying myself before stepping inside at the sound of her voice. Helena stood behind her glass desk, facing the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. She was dressed with her usual precision, her appearance flawless, controlled, untouchable. She did not turn immediately, and the silence stretched just long enough to feel deliberate. She spoke about the guests from the weekend, listing their satisfaction, their praise, the impact of my work. Each word was measured, professional, acknowledging success without warmth. When she finally turned, I noticed the subtle signs of fatigue, the faint lines around her eyes, the carefully constructed calm that seemed just a little too deliberate. She asked about my weekend, her tone neutral, but something beneath it carried weight. I answered simply, keeping everything contained, offering nothing that could complicate the moment. The conversation shifted with quiet precision, circling closer to something unspoken. Her attention sharpened, and the air between us tightened. Then she brought up my performance review, far earlier than expected. She spoke of excellence, of record-breaking results, of recognition that set me apart from everyone else in my role. There was no criticism, no flaw to correct. Instead, she spoke of potential of growth, of a future beyond my current position. She described opportunities within the corporate structure, roles that carried more authority, more influence, and greater rewards. The words settled heavily, not because they lacked merit, but because of what they implied. Moving forward would mean leaving behind the part of the job I loved most. It would mean stepping away from the lobby, from the guests, from the people who had become my daily world. She presented the opportunity with calm certainty, framing it as the natural next step for someone with my abilities. It was logical, ambitious, and undeniably significant. Yet beneath the professionalism, something else lingered in the space between us, something unspoken that made the offer feel like more than just a career move. The dismissive way she said it landed hard, sharp enough to sting. Arranging dinner reservations and calling taxes sounded like a careless reduction of everything I did. It felt like a slap. For the first time since I had walked into her office, Helena's carefully controlled composure slipped, just slightly. She tried to correct herself, but the words had already settled between us. I pressed further, unable to ignore the implication that my work was trivial or unimportant. She responded quickly, more intensely than expected, insisting that the job mattered and that I mattered. The emphasis in her voice revealed more than she intended, and just as quickly, she pulled herself back together, restoring the distance. She returned to her composed tone, framing the promotion as an opportunity I should seriously consider. If I declined, nothing would change on the surface, and I would remain in my current role. Still, she urged me to think about my future and the kind of life I wanted to build. Beneath her words lingered something heavier, something that sounded almost like pain, though her expression remained unreadable. I told her I would think about it, even as every instinct insisted the conversation was about far more than career advancement. She ended the meeting with quiet finality, signaling that there was nothing more to discuss. I moved toward the door, then paused, turning back with a sense that something was unresolved. I spoke carefully, noting the difference in her demeanor. For a brief moment, her defenses faltered. She looked up, and there was something raw in her eyes, something vulnerable that tightened my chest. Then it was gone, replaced by calm assurance as she said everything was fine, and that she was simply considering what was best for everyone. I left her office with more questions than answers, closing the door softly behind me. The rest of the day passed in a strange haze. Helena was nowhere to be seen, which was unusual for someone who normally made frequent appearances in the lobby. When I asked about her schedule, the explanation was simple: back-to-back meetings, but it did little to ease the unease. What felt even stranger was the shift in how she communicated with me. The detailed, thoughtful messages were gone, replaced by brief, formal emails that felt distant and impersonal. Everything now came through official channels, stripped of the subtle familiarity that had once existed. It felt deliberate, as if she were creating space between us. Maria noticed immediately. She pulled me aside during lunch, her concern barely hidden beneath her usual teasing tone. She pointed out the obvious changes in both of us, the tension that seemed to ripple through the entire staff. I tried to deflect, insisting that nothing had happened. The words sounded hollow even to me. Eventually, I admitted the truth about the promotion. Maria's reaction shifted from curiosity to concern as she realized what it meant. Leaving the hotel, moving into a corporate role, stepping away from everything familiar, it was more than just a career move. The situation made no sense. Only weeks earlier, Helena had been fully engaged in my work, valuing my input and trusting my instincts. Now, suddenly, she wanted me somewhere else entirely. The thought settled uneasily. It began to feel less like an opportunity and more like a removal. My phone buzzed, breaking through the spiral of thoughts. A message from Marina appeared, warm and casual, suggesting dinner and continuing the connection we had just rediscovered. As I stared at it, pieces began to fall into place. The timing of Helena's shift in behavior, her questions about my weekend, the sudden distance, it all pointed to one moment. The night of the gala, realization hit quietly but firmly. Helena had seen us together. The laughter, the closeness, the familiarity between Marina and me could have easily been misunderstood. From the outside, it might have looked like something more than friendship. The possibility settled heavily. If Helena believed I was involved with someone, it might explain everything: the distance, the promotion, the attempt to move me away. The deeper question lingered beneath it all, far more unsettling than the rest. It raised the possibility that her reaction was not purely professional. I pushed the thought aside, but it refused to disappear. The rest of the day became a blur of distraction. Every memory of our recent interactions replayed in my mind: the way she had looked at me, the shift in her tone, the careful avoidance. By evening, I found myself back on the executive floor, drawn there without fully deciding to go. Her office lights were still on, and through the glass, I could see her standing by the window, silhouetted against the fading light. She looked different, smaller somehow, less untouchable than usual. I hesitated outside her door, unsure of what I could possibly say. The truth felt tangled and uncertain, and the distance between us suddenly seemed impossible to cross. Before I could act, she turned slightly, and our eyes met through the glass. The moment held, fragile and unspoken. Then she moved away, deliberately turning her back, closing off whatever connection had flickered between us. The message was unmistakable. She was not ready to face whatever lay beneath the surface. I returned to the lobby with a heaviness in my chest that felt dangerously close to heartbreak. In the days that followed, the distance only grew. Helena became a distant presence, visible only in passing, never lingering, never engaging. All communication remained formal, stripped of any personal trace. I threw myself into work, pushing harder than ever, filling every moment with tasks and responsibilities. I reorganized systems, improved processes, and handled every request with relentless focus. None of it quieted my thoughts. Marina continued to reach out, her messages thoughtful and patient. Plans were made and postponed, each delay adding another layer of complication I struggled to understand. By midweek, the tension reached a breaking point. During a staff briefing, new protocols were introduced. The changes were restrictive, unnecessary, and entirely out of character for the way the hotel operated. Every request now required approval, documentation, justification. The room fell silent as the implications became clear. These were not improvements, they were obstacles. After the meeting, I confronted David, needing to see the details for myself. As I read through the requirements, frustration built steadily. Simple tasks had been turned into complicated procedures, slowing everything down and undermining the very essence of the service we provided. The conclusion became unavoidable. This was not about efficiency. It felt targeted. David confirmed what I had begun to suspect. Helena had been reviewing my work in detail, searching for issues that did not exist. My record was flawless, my performance beyond question. There were no mistakes to justify these changes, only the growing sense that something personal had crossed into the professional world, reshaping everything in its path. These new protocols made no sense unless their purpose was to make my work unbearable. I handed the papers back, my hands unsteady with frustration. David offered a quiet warning, reminding me that in all his years working with Helena, he had never seen her behave this way. Whatever was happening had crossed into something personal. That evening I stayed late, partly because the new rules doubled the workload and partly to avoid going home to an empty apartment filled with too many thoughts. After 9, the hotel settled into silence. The usual energy faded, leaving the lobby calm and still under soft lighting. I was alone except for the night security guard making his rounds upstairs. As I gathered my things, the quiet was broken by the soft sound of the executive elevator. I looked up and saw Helena step onto the mezzanine. She wore dark jeans and a white silk blouse, more casual than I had ever seen her, yet still carrying that unmistakable presence. She paused at the railing, looking down, and our eyes met across the distance. For a moment neither of us moved, then she turned toward the elevator. Instinct took over before hesitation could stop me. I called out to her, my voice echoing in the stillness. She stopped, one hand resting on the elevator button. Her tone remained controlled as she acknowledged me, noting that I was working late again. I answered plainly, letting the frustration slip through, pointing out how the new requirements had made everything harder. She responded with polished professionalism, describing the changes as improvements. That was the breaking point. The calm, distant tone only sharpened everything I had been holding in. I told her to drop the corporate language and face what was really happening. The use of her first name broke the barrier we had always maintained. It startled her, but I did not step back. I laid it out clearly. Just weeks earlier, she had been communicating directly, appreciating my work, trusting my judgment. Now she had created a system that felt designed to push me out. I demanded to know what had changed. She insisted that nothing had changed, framing everything as recognition of my potential. The word lingered between us, heavy with meaning. I refused to accept it. I stepped closer, my voice rising as I spoke about everything I had done for the hotel, every improvement, every success. I made it clear that I would not accept being treated as if I had suddenly become incompetent. She denied ever saying that, but her silence afterward said more than her words. When she finally spoke, her voice dropped to a quiet admission. It was easier this way. That answer only deepened the confusion. I pressed further, refusing to accept distance and half-truths. The tension between us tightened, and for the first time her composure truly faltered. She tried to retreat behind professionalism, calling the conversation inappropriate, but the words lacked conviction. I stood my ground, making it clear that the situation itself had already crossed that line. The micromanagement, the avoidance, the sudden coldness, it all demanded an explanation. She resisted, insisting that some truths only made things worse. The space between us felt vast despite the few steps that separated us. I softened my tone, urging her to trust me enough to speak honestly. Silence stretched until it almost broke. Then she finally gave in. She spoke about the gala, about seeing me with Marina. She described the moment with careful restraint, admitting that I had looked genuinely happy in a way she had not seen before. I explained the truth, that Marina was simply an old friend, nothing more. She already knew. She had looked into it, confirming the facts. Yet that knowledge had not changed what she felt. Her hands tightened at her sides as she admitted that the future still mattered, that possibilities alone had been enough to affect her. When I challenged her on why that should matter, she flinched, acknowledging that it should not, and that was exactly the problem. The silence that followed carried a weight neither of us could ignore. When she finally looked at me again, her eyes held something unguarded, something close to breaking. She said it plainly. She had been jealous. The confession came with a mix of frustration and self-awareness, as if she could not believe her own reaction. She spoke about watching us together, about the way I had laughed, the way I had looked at Marina, and how it had stirred something she could not control. The admission changed everything. It stripped away the distance, leaving only honesty in its place. She tried to explain how she had fought against it, how she had attempted to rationalize and suppress the feeling. Then she revealed the truth she had been avoiding. She had fallen for me. The words landed with undeniable force, shifting everything I thought I understood. She admitted it fully, no longer hiding behind restraint or logic. The realization had driven every decision she had made since. The distance, the promotion, the restrictive protocols, they had all been attempts to protect both of us, to prevent something that could damage reputations, create rumors, and complicate everything beyond repair. From her perspective, it was the only solution. From mine, it felt like punishment for something I had not chosen. I told her that decisions like that should not be made alone. The choice should have been mine as well. She argued that I did not fully understand the consequences, that she was trying to shield me from them. I stepped closer, closing the space between us, meeting her gaze without hesitation. I made it clear that she was not alone in what she felt. I admitted that I had been struggling too, that her messages had meant more than they should have, that I noticed her presence, her absence, every small detail that set her apart, that seeing her with others stirred something I could no longer ignore. The truth settled between us, undeniable and exposed. The silence that followed carried everything we had been avoiding. She finally spoke, her voice unsteady now, acknowledging that this was exactly why she had tried to create distance. The conversation itself proved how far things had already gone. It felt less like recklessness and more like clarity, as if everything we had avoided was finally being seen for what it was. It also carried the weight of risk, the kind that could upend everything we had built. I reached out slowly and touched her hand. She did not pull away. The contact held a quiet promise, fragile but real. She looked down at our hands, a slight tremor running through her. For a moment, it seemed like we stood at the edge of something that could change everything. Then she pulled back gently. She said she could not do it. Her voice was soft but firm, and before anything else could be said, she turned and walked toward the elevator, leaving me alone in the quiet lobby with my heart racing and everything inside me unsettled. The next morning felt like the aftermath of something seismic. Nothing looked different, yet everything felt altered beneath the surface. A memo waited on my desk announcing that Helena would be traveling for 2 weeks. All decisions would be handled by the corporate office, and the new protocols would remain in place. Maria read over my shoulder and spoke with blunt certainty. The situation had shaken Helena, and distance had become her solution. I had not shared what happened the night before, but it was clear enough that something significant had occurred. I tried to convince myself that space might help, though it felt untrue even as I thought it. The possibility lingered that distance would only give her time to make a more permanent decision about my future. Work continued, but it felt hollow. Without Helena's presence or her messages, the hotel seemed dimmer, less alive. The new protocols turned simple tasks into exhausting processes, replacing seamless service with endless paperwork. By midday, frustration settled into a steady pressure. Even the smallest requests required layers of approval, and the efficiency we once took pride in was slipping away. In the middle of it all, Marina called. Her voice carried warmth and ease, offering an escape from the tension that had consumed my week. She suggested dinner, something simple and familiar, a chance to step away from everything weighing on me. I hesitated, then agreed. The normalcy of it felt necessary, something steady in the middle of uncertainty. That evening, I went to the rooftop restaurant she had chosen. The place was as beautiful as ever, with sweeping views of the ocean and a calm, elegant atmosphere. Marina was already there, glowing with energy, her presence instantly easing some of the strain I had been carrying. We slipped into conversation easily, as if no time had passed. For a while everything felt light again. We talked about our lives, shared memories, and laughed in ways that reminded me of who we used to be. Eventually, the conversation turned toward my work. I kept it simple at first, describing the recent changes without going too deep. Marina watched me closely, reading what I did not say as easily as what I did. She knew me too well to miss the truth beneath the surface. The conversation shifted, and I found myself opening up despite my hesitation. I spoke about someone who had changed everything, someone brilliant and composed, someone who made even the smallest moments feel different. Admitting that she was my boss made the situation clearer and more complicated at the same time. The boundaries, the risks, the consequences all stood in the way of anything simple. Avoidance had not made things easier. It had only made everything heavier. Marina listened without judgment, her expression thoughtful. She spoke about her own life, about the choices she had made in pursuit of success, and how those choices had left her feeling disconnected from what truly mattered. Her perspective carried weight. Living carefully had not brought her happiness. It had only created a life that looked right but felt wrong. She reminded me that some things are worth the risk, especially when they bring a sense of being fully alive. The idea settled deeply, challenging the fear that had been guiding every decision. The thought of walking away from something real, something meaningful, felt heavier than the fear of what could go wrong. As the evening continued, the conversation shifted again, her tone brightening as she returned to the news she had been eager to share. Marina's words landed with quiet certainty as she shared her decision to return to Miami. The excitement in her voice was undeniable, a sharp contrast to the heaviness she had carried before. She spoke about leaving Los Angeles behind, about choosing a life that felt real instead of carefully constructed, about reclaiming the parts of herself she had lost. Her plans unfolded with confidence: freelance consulting, a new apartment near the beach, a fresh start built on authenticity rather than expectation. The offer to help her settle in came naturally, and for a moment, the idea of having her close again felt comforting. That comfort shifted when her tone softened and her intentions became clear. She reached across the table, holding on to something hopeful, something that had lived quietly between them for years. The possibility of something more lingered in her words, gentle but undeniable. The truth settled heavily in the space between them. Friendship remained deep and unshakable, but it was no longer the only thing in the room. The confession came quietly, but it carried weight. Feelings that could no longer be dismissed or hidden took shape, and with them came clarity. The realization was steady and unyielding, rooted in something deeper than admiration or convenience. Marina understood before anything more needed to be said. Disappointment flickered across her face, but it was softened by acceptance. She let go of what she had imagined and replaced it with something braver. Her encouragement carried no bitterness, only honesty. She spoke about choosing courage over comfort, about not letting fear dictate the course of something meaningful. Her words stayed long after the conversation ended, echoing with a quiet insistence that truth deserved action. The night closed with a mix of warmth and melancholy, the kind that comes from endings that make space for something new. The ride home became a turning point, each passing moment sharpening a decision that had already begun to form. By the time the door closed behind her, hesitation had given way to resolve. The message came together slowly, each word deliberate, each sentence carrying the weight of everything left unsaid before. It acknowledged the risks, the reality of consequences, the impossibility of pretending indifference. It refused to accept distance as a solution. It chose honesty over safety, connection over silence. The final line stood firm, a declaration of intent, a refusal to walk away from something that mattered. Sending it changed everything. The silence that followed stretched longer than expected, filling the days with restless anticipation. Work became a refuge, a way to stay occupied while waiting for a response that never came. Exhaustion replaced routine, and the absence of even the smallest acknowledgement became harder to ignore. The hotel continued to function, but something essential felt missing. The new protocols slowed everything down, turning simple tasks into complicated processes. The seamless rhythm that once defined the place was replaced by frustration, both for the staff and the guests. Still, the work continued, driven by determination rather than ease. The days blurred together until the quiet of another late evening settled over the lobby. The stillness was broken by a phone call that seemed ordinary at first. A familiar guest expressed gratitude, recalling a moment carefully arranged, one that had turned into a memory worth holding on to. The tone shifted quickly, moving from appreciation to concern, carrying with it something far more serious. A rumor had begun to spread, fueled by speculation and amplified by attention. The headline alone was enough to change everything. Images captured without context told a story that was never meant to be public, shaping a narrative that twisted something private into something scandalous. The weight of it settled instantly, heavy and unavoidable. The screen displayed blurred photographs, but the truth behind them was unmistakable. A moment of vulnerability had been turned into evidence, a connection reframed as controversy. The reality of consequences no longer felt distant or theoretical. It had arrived, undeniable and immediate, threatening to unravel everything that had been built so carefully. They had managed to identify me, digging into my employment history and twisting it into something ugly, suggesting I had been given advantages in exchange for personal favors. By the time I finished reading, my hands were shaking. This was exactly what Helena had feared, the reason she had tried to push distance between us from the beginning. I grabbed my phone and called David, needing answers, needing a way to reach her. He told me she was already aware, already dealing with the fallout, locked in meetings and damage control since the day before. The confirmation made everything heavier. She had seen it, lived it, and was carrying the weight of it alone. He said she was flying back that night, though he warned it was not a good time to approach her. The warning did nothing to quiet the urgency building inside me. The story spread fast, faster than anything I could control. Messages began to pour in from every direction, concern mixed with curiosity and judgment. What had been a private moment was now public spectacle, dissected and reshaped by strangers. I shut everything down and prepared myself for what would come next. The next morning brought cameras outside the hotel, a small crowd, but enough to turn a simple entrance into something exposed and uncomfortable. Inside, the atmosphere had changed. Conversations lowered when I passed, eyes lingered a second too long, and the weight of speculation hung in the air. Maria stayed close, steady and protective, brushing off the tension with sharp honesty, though even she could not erase it completely. Helena had returned in the night and gone straight to her office. By the time I was called upstairs, the building already felt different, as if something fundamental had shifted. Through the glass, I saw her pacing, restless and worn down. When I stepped inside, the change in her was impossible to ignore. The composure she carried so effortlessly was gone, replaced by exhaustion and strain. She spoke about meetings with lawyers and PR teams, about financial losses and scrutiny from the board, each detail landing with the weight of consequence. She took the blame onto herself without hesitation, framing everything as a failure of her position, her responsibility, her judgment. I tried to share that burden, but she would not let me. Her solution was clear, controlled, and devastating. A statement would be released, denying everything, reducing what had happened to a misunderstanding. It was a clean answer, one designed to protect the company, to contain the damage, to restore order. It erased the truth as if it had never existed. The distance returned in her voice, stronger this time, reinforced by fear and obligation. She framed everything as necessity, as the only way forward. The connection between us was pushed aside, treated as something that should never have happened at all. The more she spoke, the more it felt like watching her retreat behind walls she had rebuilt overnight. The reality settled cold and heavy. What had been shared between us could not simply disappear, no matter how carefully it was denied. The truth existed whether it was acknowledged or not, and pretending otherwise only deepened the fracture. She stood firm in her reasoning, anchored to responsibility, to the weight of everything tied to her name and position. The company, the employees, the reputation, all of it mattered more than what she felt. She chose stability over uncertainty, control over risk, even if it meant turning away from something real. I reached the only conclusion that made sense in the middle of it all. If the professional boundary was the problem, then removing it became the solution. The idea hung between us, heavy and irreversible. She reacted instantly, the implications hitting just as hard for her as they did for me. Her response came from a place of fear and concern, shaped by everything she believed could go wrong. She spoke about consequences that would follow me, about doubt that would attach itself to every success, about a reputation that could be permanently altered. The reality she painted was harsh, but it was not entirely untrue. Still, her solution remained the same. Distance, separation, a controlled ending disguised as opportunity. The transfer offer was placed in front of me, polished and generous, a path forward that removed me from the center of the storm. It came with everything anyone could want on paper: a higher salary, better benefits, a future carefully secured. When I hesitated, she offered the alternative with the same calm precision. A clean exit, a strong reference, a severance package that softened the blow. It was presented as choice, but it felt like an ending already decided. The folder in my hands carried the weight of everything she was trying to fix. The offer was generous, undeniably so, but it was also final in a way that left little room for anything else. It was not just about career advancement or damage control. It was about closing the door on something she believed could only lead to more loss. Her composure cracked as she admitted it was an attempt to salvage something from the wreckage. In her eyes, the situation had already caused too much damage. In mine, it only felt destroyed because she had decided it was. They had identified me somehow, digging into my employment history and twisting it into something ugly, suggesting promotions and opportunities had been traded for personal favors. By the time I finished reading, my hands were shaking. This was everything Helena had feared, the exact reason she had tried to push me away. I grabbed my phone and called David, my voice tight with urgency. I told him I needed to reach Helena immediately. He explained she was locked in meetings, already aware of the situation, already dealing with the fallout. The PR team was working to contain the damage, and Helena was blaming herself for everything spiraling out of control. She was flying back that night, upset and overwhelmed, and he warned me that seeing her might only make things worse. I ended the call and stared at the screen, watching as our private moment turned into public spectacle. In less than a day, something real and fragile had been twisted into gossip for strangers to consume. Messages flooded in from people who had seen the story, concern mixed with curiosity, sympathy tangled with intrusive questions. I shut my laptop and gathered my things, bracing myself for whatever would come next. The next morning, cameras waited outside the hotel. Not a massive crowd, but enough to make every step inside feel exposed. I kept my head down and slipped through the doors, only to find the tension had followed me inside. Conversations hushed when I passed. Some faces showed sympathy, others judgment. Maria appeared beside me, steady and protective, telling me to ignore the looks. Helena had returned late in the night and had locked herself away in her office. The day dragged under the weight of silence and speculation. Guests whispered. Staff hesitated. Everything felt fragile, like one wrong move could shatter what remained. Around noon, David came to get me. Helena wanted to see me. Her office felt suffocating. She looked exhausted, her usual composure replaced by something worn and fragile. She spoke about meetings, legal teams, PR strategies, the financial impact already hitting the company. Every word carried the weight of consequences far bigger than just us. She took responsibility, placing the blame squarely on herself, insisting she had allowed personal feelings to interfere with her role. I refused to let her carry that alone. What existed between us had never been one-sided. She laid out the plan to contain the damage, a formal statement denying everything, the photos dismissed as misleading, the narrative controlled before it could spiral further. It was the safest path, the one designed to protect the company, the employees, everything she had built. But that path erased us. She insisted there could never be anything between us, not after this. Not with the imbalance of power, not with the scrutiny already closing in. The walls went back up, her voice steady, controlled, distant. I saw fear beneath it, disguised as logic. I pushed back, refusing to let fear rewrite something real into something shameful. She called it realism. I called it running away. The argument sharpened, emotions cutting through the careful professionalism she tried to maintain. She spoke of responsibility, of the thousands of people depending on her decisions. I spoke of truth, of not destroying something meaningful before it even had a chance to exist. Then came her solution: a transfer, a promotion, more money, better opportunities, a clean break from the scandal. A way for me to move forward without being tied to the rumors. And if I refused, there was another option waiting quietly beneath it: walking away entirely. I looked at the offer, recognizing how generous it was, how carefully it had been constructed to solve every problem except the one that mattered most. It was a way to protect everything except what we felt. She asked me to take it, to build the future I deserved, to forget everything between us. I told her I needed time. At the door, I stopped and told her the truth she didn't want to hear. Her fear of risk was guaranteeing the unhappiness she was trying to avoid. I left her office and stepped back into the rhythm of the hotel, where everything continued as if nothing had changed. Guests checked in. Staff carried on. The world moved forward while mine stood still. Marina was waiting for me, concern written all over her face. She pulled me into a hug, grounding me in something real. She took me away from the hotel, away from the noise and the pressure, giving me space to breathe again. I thought about the offer, about the safe choice, about the life I could build if I walked away. Then I thought about Helena, about the way everything felt sharper, brighter, more alive when she was near. I wasn't ready to let that go. The weekend passed in a blur of restless thoughts. I read the offer again and again, weighing security against something far more uncertain but infinitely more meaningful. Marina stayed close, reminding me that sometimes protecting something too carefully was the fastest way to lose it. By Monday, the decision settled into place. I walked into the hotel knowing what I had to do. The atmosphere had shifted again, quieter now, controlled. Helena was in a board meeting, facing pressure that had only grown worse. The damage wasn't just personal anymore. It was affecting everyone. That clarity made the choice easier. I wrote my resignation and left it on her desk alongside the transfer offer. I said my goodbyes to the people who had become my family, ignoring the doubt that tried to creep in. Walking away wasn't about giving up. It was about removing the obstacle that stood between us. As I reached the elevator, my phone buzzed with a message telling me to turn on the news. I watched the live broadcast, my heart pounding as Helena sat before the press, composed and untouchable. She handled every question with precision, denying the rumors, protecting the company exactly as expected. Then something shifted. Her voice changed, softer, more human. She spoke about responsibility, about sacrifice, about the cost of building something successful at the expense of personal happiness. The room grew quiet as she allowed the truth to surface beneath the polished answers. And then she stopped hiding. She looked into the camera, her composure finally giving way to something honest and undeniable, and admitted that she had fallen in love with someone extraordinary. She spoke about someone who finds beauty in the smallest moments, someone whose presence makes every day feel brighter, someone who had shown her what it truly means to live authentically. The room erupted into chaos as reporters shouted over one another, but she rose to her feet and ignored the noise. She admitted that she had been a coward, that fear of scandal and concern for appearances had kept her from fighting for the most important thing in her life. She looked straight into the camera and spoke with quiet certainty, naming me as the finest concierge the Marlowe Grand had ever known and, more importantly, the best person she had ever met. She declared that loving me was not something she would deny, even if it cost her everything she had built. Then she walked away, leaving behind stunned reporters and shaken executives. I stared at my phone in disbelief, trying to process what had just happened. The woman known for her control and distance had just laid her heart bare in front of the world. My phone began ringing nonstop, but I ignored every call and ran for the elevator. When I reached the lobby, she was already there, standing in the center of the marble floor, still dressed in her navy suit but somehow transformed. She looked lighter, more real. Staff lingered nearby, pretending to work while watching closely, and a few guests held up their phones, hoping to capture whatever came next. She walked toward me with quiet determination and stopped just a few feet away. She acknowledged the fallout, the damage to her career, the possibility of losing everything. None of it seemed to matter to her anymore. What mattered was standing there in front of me, finally choosing honesty over fear. She admitted how wrong she had been, how she had nearly thrown away the only thing that truly mattered. She had read my resignation letter and initially believed it was the right choice, a noble sacrifice for everyone involved. Now she saw it for what it was, another mistake driven by fear. She spoke about realizing, in a room full of people focused only on image and control, that she had forgotten what it felt like to be alive. She told me that my presence had reminded her that my warmth and fearlessness had broken through the walls she had spent years building. Then she said it plainly, without hesitation. She loved me. She loved the way I made people feel seen, the way I anticipated needs before they were spoken, the way I carried light into every space I entered. She loved my laughter, my nervous habits, and the way I believed in others. Tears streamed down my face, but I smiled through them and told her I loved her too, even with all her stubbornness and need to carry the weight of the world alone. She stepped closer, holding my face gently, acknowledging the challenges ahead. There would be more scrutiny, more gossip, more people trying to tear us apart. None of that mattered compared to the certainty she felt. Facing everything together was better than living with regret. She leaned in and kissed me, right there in the center of the lobby. It was soft and certain and full of promise. Around us, the staff broke into applause, the tension of the past days dissolving into something warm and celebratory. From that moment on, everything changed. The future was uncertain. There were still risks, still consequences waiting to unfold, but we faced them side by side. Whatever came next, we would figure it out together. Months later, the story that had once threatened to destroy everything had transformed into something else entirely. The hotel flourished, its reputation reshaped into a symbol of romance and authenticity. Guests came not just for luxury, but for the story, for the feeling that something real existed within those walls. She kept her position stronger than before, and I found my own place in that world, a role that reflected both my work and everything we had overcome. What once seemed impossible had become part of our reality. One evening, as we sat together watching the sunset paint the ocean in gold and pink, there was a quiet understanding between us. The journey had been messy and complicated, filled with doubt and risk, but it had led us exactly where we needed to be. There were no regrets. The challenges, the noise, the exposure, all of it had been worth it because it brought us to a place where nothing needed to be hidden anymore. She reached for my hand, her fingers intertwining with mine, steady and sure. Then she surprised me, pulling out a small velvet box that caught the fading light. Inside was a simple, elegant ring. She spoke about choosing love without hesitation, about wanting a life built together not just in moments, but in every day that followed. She wanted mornings and nights shared, a future shaped side by side, something lasting and real. She knelt in front of me, letting go of every last piece of restraint, offering not just a promise but a life. I said yes through tears and laughter without doubt or hesitation. When she stood and kissed me, the people who had stood beside us through everything gathered around, celebrating not just the moment, but everything it represented. Love had endured fear, truth had broken through silence, and what remained was something stronger than either of us had imagined. The ocean breeze carried laughter and music through the air as we stood together, certain of one thing above all else. Whatever came next, we would face it together, having chosen love over fear and each other over everything else.